let's talk about sex.
Wonderful.
Okay. I know it's your favorite topic.
It's a fascinating topic. It's so interesting.
So let's talk. I know you're a urologist and you're interested in the whole person, but when we think of urology, we think of pelvic organs. But I want to talk about the brain side of sex, and I want to talk about libido.
Mhm.
Tell me, what on earth is going on with women's libido?
Yeah. So libido, no adults get adult sex education. We get a crappy disease and pregnancy prevention plan when we were younger. We never learn how to talk about it. We watch Hollywood films. We might watch porn. We get a very skewed view of how our bodies actually work. So Sigmund Freud kind of wrecked it for us, as he did many things. And he called libido appetitive, which is a fantastic word. But appetitive means appetite driven. And so if you don't eat, you're going to get more hungry. If you don't drink, you're going to get more thirsty. If you don't sleep, you're going to get more tired. Those are appetitive drives. And he said sex is an appetitive drive. For most people, if you don't have sex, you don't want more sex, right? So women sit around saying, well, I don't want sex. I guess this is how it is. Now, how our body actually works is the responsive desire is like, no, you shouldn't have sex 24 hours a day because you got to have a job and you got to raise some kids and you got to get some sleep, right? It would be destructive for you to want sex all the time. And there are some people who do have that high appetitive drive, and it can be quite bothersome to them. So how our bodies work is we say, you know what, you're focused on other things. If you put yourself in a place to be receptive, to be open, to be surrounded by sexual cues, it's the sexual cues that actually prime your body for saying, all right, let's prep for having some sexual activity. Those sexual cues are going to be different for everybody, but it often means being in a relaxed state, not chasing around trying to get 10 things done, right? Your body needs to be relaxed, to be receptive, to be open, to be able to focus in the present moment, to be focused on bodily sensations, because it's the combination of the sensations in the pelvis and the brain primed together that makes the best orgasm.
Okay. And so clearly then it's a very complicated thing to say why women in the peri and postmenopause are struggling with libido, because it's clearly not just a purely hormonal thing.
That's right. Yeah, it's complex, right? Because we're complex. We're complex things. We wouldn't want to be otherwise. We aren't bacteria. So sex is biopsychosocial, which means it's a little bit biology, a little bit psychology, how our brain is thinking, and then a little bit about how we're socialized, right? Are you allowed to be sexual? Who's allowed to be sexual? Who's allowed to be sexual more than other people? Like, how are we cultured, right? Who's allowed to have their orgasm prioritized in a sexual event? The biology part is really where perimenopause and menopause kicks in. And I always joke, like, I got into menopause because of sex, because I really wanted to understand when women said, my sex drive went down with perimenopause, menopause, what did the research say? Now, again, because we're complex, not everybody's sex drive goes down in midlife. Some sex drive goes up, probably because they're more confident, they give less shits, they know they can't get pregnant, they're in a partnered relationship that is wonderfully caring and explorative and like sex positive, right? So it is a stereotype to say everybody's libido goes down. Some stays the same, some gets better. But there is a role, again, estrogen and testosterone work in the brain. That's where libido comes from. Multiple areas in the brain too, not just this little box labeled libido in the brain. And so it is more of a myth to say testosterone is the only hormone for sexual desire. I have tons of women, you throw an estrogen patch on them, their hot flashes are done, their heart palpitations are done, they're sleeping better, their mood's better, and the libido's allowed to rise naturally because she's just simply feeling better, right? So it is wonderfully complex, but it is very real if you notice that your sexual function is changing in midlife.
So I kind of feel like I see a number of different, you see patterns among your patients. So I think one of the patterns that I see are people who are very happily partnered. They're very loyal to their partner, but they've got a lot of guilt because they just can't be bothered. I had a lady who, I have to admit, she did make me burst out laughing because she said she'd rather have a warm ham sandwich than have sex. She said she just couldn't be bothered. She was like, just leave me alone. Let me watch my Netflix show. But a lot of women express a huge guilt.
Yeah.
They'll say, I feel so bad for my partner. And sometimes I'll say, well, do you have sex? And they say, oh, yeah, I do. But like, I don't want to have sex at all. Or it's uncomfortable. They kind of put up with it
Mhm.
because they feel like that's the thing that you should do.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What we call I mean, there's so little research in it, I think, because we don't prioritize women, but this, like, um, duty sex is what they
Mm.
call it, or, you just have to do it to keep other people happy. Now, some people do it out of love, but some people do it out of, like, "I don't want this relationship to end, I wanna prioritize it." So a good sex medicine doctor they're just curious people, right? Because if somebody says, "I don't wanna have sex," that could be 12 different reasons why. Is it because of pain? Is it because you never had great sex in the first place? Or is it because the sex was great, but now really the idea of it, and we have to then think more about dopamine receptors. We have to think more about hormones, right? And then there's the people who simply say, I want to want. Okay. Versus the people who are like, no, I'm not thinking about it. I'm running a business. I got kids. But when I am in that sexual context and I know how to focus on my pelvis and I know how to relax my brain, we have a wonderful time. I just need to prioritize that in my life more than I have been doing. So it's wonderfully complex. There's really help for everybody. The International Society for the Study of Women's Sexual Health, which is a mouthful, but it's the ISHWISH conference. It just happened in Atlanta in the States this week, and they're coming out with exciting processes of care, specifically looking at orgasm. That's kind of we've done a lot more work on desire than we have with orgasm. So that's gonna be the kind of the exciting new thing. I can't wait for them to publish that paper, probably still another year or 2 out from that, but they're starting to talk about in a more scientific way instead of just blowing off like, "Oh, you can't orgasm? Drink wine," right? And instead of like, "No, no, no, this could be biologic, it could be psychologic, it could be sociologic. Let's look at orgasm and how to help women achieve that."
Have you have any resources or, I don't know, websites or apps or courses that you think are helpful for patients?
Yeah, as far as, like, orgasm? Yeah. So, a very old book, she's, unfortunately passed, it's by Betty Dodson, it's called Sex for One, and that's really understanding your body, how orgasm works. Becoming Cliterate by Lori Mintz is fantastic. I think that book is still in print. OMGyes.com is a great if video doesn't turn you off and you really, like it's sex is hard, right? Because you can't "Doctor, I have heart palpitations." The doctor can put the stethoscope on the heart and understand that. But when somebody says, "I don't like sex," you're like, "That's a black box. I don't know what you're doing in there," right? Are you rubbing elbows? So if you want more video how-to, OMG Yes is useful. Make Love Not Porn is amazing for sex education, just normalizing sexuality for normal people, normal bodies. And for people, they have videos and stories of people with ostomies. They have videos and stories of people who are survivors of sexual assault. So really kind of opening up and normalizing sexuality for all people, all bodies, all ages. Because again, that sociology part of biopsychosocial is only certain people are allowed to be sexual. You have to be a certain age. You have to look a certain way. That's all made up. And so really opening that up to everybody. There's a lot of work being done with sexual health and people with disabilities. I forget, they were just at a conference I was at. It was like, Clitoral Model. If you go to Clitoral Model on Instagram, coming out with a book on perimenopause and sex, and doing a lot with like, what does healthy, normal anatomy look like? Because probably a whole nother podcast episode, but the amount of women who don't know what normal bodies look like because our images have been banned on the internet, and then they go in and they literally have cosmetic surgery to fit a fake ideologic normal pattern. To me, that needs to be talked about. I think education will go a long way into body acceptance.
Do you encourage your patients to like get a mirror and have a look at their body parts?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's tough. You do need a mirror for some of these parts. But just in exploring people's discomfort with that idea of like, do you have a problem looking at your elbow? No. Right? Of like, okay, isn't it so interesting that there's a part of your body you're uncomfortable looking at? Wow, what's that about? Where'd that come from? So it's even like just exploring that a little bit, and even if you end up never looking at it, just understanding, "Oh my gosh, there's a part of my body that society's told me not to look at." That's super interesting.
I really like trying to help people before, if possible. because it's really important for people to have an understanding of what the process looks like, what could happen, the risks that they're facing, how to protect and look after themselves. So what I really like is if people come to me when they're thinking about it to get some advice so that they know what their entitlements are, and I can talk them through the process and what to expect, because often if the separation has already happened, the emotions are so high, people can't think clearly, and then it's kind of people get blindsided by the process and get quite confused and then caught up in it, and it can be really difficult. So I think and I have to say, sometimes you don't see it coming. Sometimes it's a surprise and a shock separation. So obviously this is not going to apply to everybody. But for those people that might be thinking, things are a bit rocky, I'm not feeling safe in this situation in terms of security in the relationship, maybe I might get some advice about what that might look like. So tip 1 would be to get some advice early, and it's completely confidential. No one needs to know that you're getting that advice. Tip number 2, please make sure that you see a family lawyer and someone that actually knows what they're talking about. Just to give you a bit of an example, I met with a client yesterday, beautiful man that had spent $35,000 with a lawyer in Sydney, who turned out to be a criminal and traffic lawyer who had absolutely no idea what he was doing, happily took this man's money for absolutely nothing. The court documents were drafted so badly they got rejected by the court. The advice that he was given was completely wrong. And this poor man has spent all of his savings with a lawyer that has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. So he now has to try to get that money back, whilst at the same time try to pursue, access to his children with me, and then, spend more money. So that could have been avoided by going to see someone that knows what they're doing in the first place. So get advice early, get advice from somebody that knows what they're talking about.
So a specialist.
Absolutely. Have a team. And that's, I think, it's really fitting that you and I are having this conversation, because you were so integral to me as part of my team. Going through my own separation, I literally could not have done it without you. Like, I could not have got through that without you. And I think in those dark days, especially when you're a new mom and, Sunny didn't sleep, I was an absolute basket case. And just knowing that I could trust you, that I could come to you for help, and that you directed me to people that could actually help me, legal stuff aside, you need to have people in your corner. So what I will say to my clients when they come in is, this is a holistic approach to get you through this. It's not just about the legal stuff. You have to be supported, ideally with friends and family if you have that luxury. A lot of people don't. Yeah. If you don't have that luxury of having beautiful friends and family around you, build your own team and find a great GP. I know I can't refer to you anymore because their books are closed, but find a great GP that can refer you to a psychologist. Find a great psychologist. Somebody that you can talk to about the emotional side of things that you're going through. Find a great accountant and financial planner, especially for women or people in a relationship that don't know how the finances have been running. They don't know how it's been operating and how the bills are being paying, or how the accounts are structured, or how the companies might be set up, whether they're a director, whether they're a shareholder, what the consequences of that might look like. A lot of people come in and say, I have no idea, I just signed forms. I don't know what they were. I just signed what was put in front of me. So we often have to try to untangle and find out what's been happening over a long period of time. And I guess for me, it's about building a team to help empower people going through that process so that they have all of the information and resources available. So you want to kind of build a team so that they're coming into it with a whole range of people behind them. So you want to cater for the emotional side. So you want to make sure that they have somebody to talk to. I can talk to clients about the emotional side of things, but that's actually not my role.
Yes.
And I'm not best placed to do that. I'm not a qualified counsellor or a psychologist. I can help with the legal side of things, but they really need to have somebody on board that can help with those kind of questions and debriefing, and having somebody to share those things with. Having an accountant that can give them their own advice separate to the, couple or family accountant that might be acting. Yeah. A financial planner to help them plan, moving forward. to help them analyze documents, which can be quite confusing, in addition to the legal advice that they would be getting. So it's about building that team. And, as we move through the legal process, we would then be looking at, bringing in a mediator, or potentially I'm doing a lot of work at the moment with a child consultant who's, she's also a mediator, but she will meet with the children in the mediation process. And then she comes back to us and feeds back the children's views and their experiences.
So is she a lawyer?
No, and which I think is great, because lawyers are great. I love lawyers, but sometimes we can get in the way.
Yeah.
We're literally trained to argue and, analyze and pull things apart, and, whereas sometimes having a different perspective of a person that's coming at it with their sole view and purpose is to make sure that the children's views are represented and championed in that process. So I just, the older that I get, the more that I think we just need to try to deal with it holistically, rather than just fighting every little point. So, sorry, going back to the question, do get off track, but having a team of experts around you so that you have all of the different people in your corner to help you understand the information, having proper legal advice, having that support. I think making sure that you have an understanding of your financial circumstances is really important, and a lot of people don't. They don't even know what bank accounts there is, or what bills are being paid and from where, or what entities or like companies or trusts there might be, what property is worth. So I'll do a lot of that work at the outset to help people get an understanding of what it is that we're actually dealing with here. And then I think the most important thing is the mindset going into it, of knowing that in any separation, there's going to be compromise and you're never going to get exactly what you want. Because even if you go to court, and even if you get a judge that agrees with absolutely everything that you say, you're going to pay a hell of a lot of money to get there. And the outcome, I don't think, is ever going to be exactly what you want. And sometimes even if people do achieve that, they still don't walk away happy.
Yeah.
Because the process that they've had to go through to get there is quite traumatic in and of itself. So I think the quicker that you can get in and the quicker that you can get out, even if that means taking something that might not necessarily be what you want and compromising and getting out quickly, rather than being bogged down in ongoing legal battles and court. Court is a place that people should avoid if they can. And I have to constantly say, some people can't avoid it and some people need to be engaged in litigation. And approaching a separation, like I've just talked about, is also a luxury that some people don't have. If there's family violence, significant mental health issues, if you're dealing with somebody on the other side that's really difficult, and, a true narcissist, nearly every client I get coming in will tell me that the other side's a narcissist these days. I think it's like... It's
a kind of slightly overused phrase at this point.
It's very overused. I mean, but, in my job, I deal with true narcissists, and you cannot negotiate with a narcissist. You cannot co-parent with a narcissist. So what I'm talking about is, people that can communicate, that can try to work together, putting aside some of those differences to try to get an outcome. And what that means is being open about your financial disclosure. Don't try to hide things. If people come into it with a view to try and deceive or hide things from the other person, it's just going to take longer. We'll find it out. It takes longer. It costs everyone more money, and then it builds mistrust. So if you go through the process and you're not trusting anything that the other person says, it's really hard to get a negotiated settlement. So coming into a matter, we will try really hard to make sure that everything's on the table, that they get realistic advice, that they know the risks, that they come into it with an open mind, willing to compromise, and an understanding that you can only get a settlement two ways. One is by consent. So you have to work together and reach an agreement, or you go to court and a judge makes a decision, and a judge might make a terrible decision that doesn't work for your family. So you are best placed to make a decision that works for you and that works for your family and that works for your children. And that can only be done by consent, which means you both have to try to reach an agreement.
Do you ever feel like sometimes, there's always lots of emotion involved, and sometimes people want a settlement that kind of represents their pain?
or like a payment for their pain or suffering, or, you know, if there's been another party involved. And I often have to say to people, like, to be honest, that's not going to really become relevant in your financial settlement. Is that right? So
100%. Like, you have just summed it up. So, I mean, the legal side of things is easy, but what's really difficult is the emotional side. And we're often dealing with people coming in where there's been a traumatic relationship breakdown. One person is often completely blindsided, whereas there's usually one party that's kind of seen it coming a little bit in advance. You know, unfortunately, some relationships do break down because of infidelity, and that can be really painful and really hard. It can also break down because of violence or mental health issues or drug and alcohol issues or gambling. And a lot of that can be really hard and traumatic. So people are grappling to deal with these really big emotional issues, and people are hurt. And sometimes they want, you know, justice, or they want the other person to pay, or there's this sense that the court's going to, as you say, compensate for that pain. And that's not how it works. The court does not compensate for pain. Infidelity is irrelevant in a family law matter. It might be relevant in a parenting context if we're trying to work out, you know, how to navigate with the children, you know, and the emotional and conflict between the parents. But in a financial settlement, it's completely irrelevant. And that can be really hard for people, because sometimes they're like, I want that person to pay because they've hurt me. And so trying to help people work through to let go of some of that and understand that the court is never going to say, you're completely right, this person's an asshole, you get everything because of what happened. It just doesn't work like that. So that's why I think addressing the emotional side of the relationship breakdown is vital to work through the process while you're doing the legal side of things, to make sure you have that support, because the legal side is not going to fix that stuff.
Ladies, are you feeling flat, foggy, or like you've lost touch with who you used to be? Well, it's time to rediscover you. After 25 plus years as a doctor working with women as a GP, an aesthetic doctor, and in women's health, I've created the 16-week Rediscover You program to help you reclaim your energy, confidence, and vitality. This guided, evidence-based journey is specifically designed to support you through the perimenopause and menopause. Together, we'll reset your hormones, boost your energy levels, create sustainable weight management, and restore the clarity and glow you deserve. We'll take a deep dive into what's really happening inside your body, from hormonal shifts and skin changes to disrupted sleep patterns and mood swings. You'll get the tools and understanding to navigate the powerful transition with confidence, clarity, and care, because you deserve to feel like you again. Our waitlist is now open. Click the link in the show notes to save your place.
So I was scrolling on social media, Facebook specifically, the other day, and I saw in a mum's group a post that keeps seeming to come up, which is people moving to the area that we live in, and obviously mums with children, and struggling to establish themselves with a social network or friends. And probably about the 5th or 6th time I've seen a very similar post written, and it really made me think back to 13 years ago whenever I moved to Australia. And I have to admit that friendship and friends was probably one of my greatest fears. How was I going to make friends? How much was I going to miss my friends back in Ireland? And how lonely was I going to feel? And I have to say, as a mum with young children, that can often be a really nice avenue into making friends. And sometimes I do feel that perhaps for our male partners, it can be a little bit more challenging, because maybe they're not heading to the school gates or the daycare quite as much as we are. So it really made me think about, what are the advantages of having friends, and why as humans are we so desperate to have that connection? What is it that it brings for us? And what are the health advantages and benefits of friendship? Because the reality is, we know that the more we prioritize friendship, it would seem that the happier and healthier we seem to be. And it's not even just humans who seem to prioritize friendship. If we even think of, like, I've got 3 dogs, and definitely 2 of the dogs seem to be friendlier with each other than one of the other dogs. And we know that primates and monkeys seem to make friendships as well and seem to prioritize them. So there's obviously some other benefit than it just being fun to hang out with people. And so I've been thinking a lot about friendship and what are the health advantages, because obviously as a doctor, I want to know, are there health benefits? And it would seem that there are, because some of my patients who struggle perhaps with mental illness or addiction often do seem to have lower self-esteem and less social connections. And it's always hard to understand which came first. Is it the lack of social connections that's contributing to their mental health problems, or is it the other way around, that their mental health problems have just contributed to their friendships falling away? And I think there's probably a little bit of both. So we know that friendship seems to be something that's quite easy for children. Take 4 and 5-year-olds to a play park, and usually within 5 or 10 minutes they'll be playing happily with other children, laughing and giggling. But it seems as we get a bit older that we put our guard up a little bit more, and it all becomes a little bit more stressful and difficult to break down those barriers and become friends with people. So I wanted just to think about, like, what does it mean to have a friendship, and what are the benefits both for you and the other person, and what even is a friendship? And I was looking it up, and you look up the dictionary and you look up medical definitions, and there's all sorts of different connotations and directions that the definition seems to be taken. But the reality of a friendship in an adult seems to be that obviously it has to be voluntary. So that we are all not going to make friends with someone because someone tells us we're going to. And I suppose our kids are a bit like that too. And I think sometimes as adults that we can be a little bit at risk of trying to push our kids towards friendships, and yet we wouldn't want someone to do the same to us. So definitely it has to be a voluntary thing that you want to be friends with this person. And friendship has to also be reciprocal. So I think we've probably all had a relationship with a friend that hasn't felt that it's kind of two ways, that it's felt one person's maybe a bit more invested. So maybe somebody wants to have, 3 WhatsApp messages a year and send you a Christmas card, and the other person wants to be talking on the phone every day. And so there's a bit of a mismatch there in that friendship. I think for most friendships, it tends to be a bit of an informal thing. So usually when you're with your friends, your language is a little bit more informal and friendly, and you're hopefully a lot more relaxed than you normally are. Friendships also need to be quite stimulating. So we all know that there are people that we find really interesting and we're excited to catch up with them. And then unfortunately, there are people who their interests just don't interest us and they seem a little bit boring. And then obviously we're looking for that companionship. So we want ultimately someone to hang out with, or someone that we can pick up the phone to. And we want that person to kind of have loyalty towards us. And so what are the reasons why we want to have this? Well, in basic terms, clearly it feels pretty good to have a friendship, and it's always lovely to feel like you've got that loyalty. Like, I know recently I've ended up with a lovely, multiple different groups of friends, but lovely friends. And I know I've had a lot going on with work recently. I've had a lot of presentations and talks, and I've been sort of really, really bogged down kind of preparing, and to be honest, being quite nervous and probably knee deep in imposter syndrome. And I have to say, I've had to remind myself, one, to make an effort and stay in touch with friends, but also it's been my friends who've been the people who, when I've had a little freak out or been feeling a bit overwhelmed, it's been my friends who've definitely got me back on track, calmed me down, and their absolute sort of love and loyalty for me is definitely one of those things that gives me that sense of better self-esteem and value, because they believe in me, and therefore it helps me to have a little bit more self-belief as well. So I think the great thing about having friends is that, they give you sympathy, they give you affection, hopefully they give you encouragement, and they're people that you can trust. And the other lovely thing about friends is, yes, it's nice to have a coffee or a lunch date with someone, but the reality is that they can be really practically supportive as well. So I know, in our group of friends, we've had, some of our friends have recently had separations and been moving house and all sorts of things, and the friends sort of stepped up in a very practical way. And I know whenever I had some surgery last year, again, my friends were very generous at dropping off dinners and helping pick up my children from school and things. So there's all that very practical, supportive friends. And I think the other thing that we always have to remember with friendship is, like, it is an investment. So I always think of all relationships a little bit like a bank account, and you can't take out of the bank account before you've put money into the bank account. You can't get it overdrawn right at the beginning. And I think we always have to remember that, you know, if we want loyalty, we have to give loyalty. And if we want someone's time, we have to give time. So the way I explain it to my children is literally like a piggy bank, and you've got to put some deposits in the piggy bank. So in all friendships, the deposits might take a different amount of time. You might need to work on a friendship for years before you really feel very comfortable to take money back out of the piggy bank, as it were. But I think the reality is, if you just keep that in mind, that I find that friendships tend to go awry whenever someone is trying to do too much taking, or on the other hand, someone's doing too much giving, and then they end up a bit frustrated and resentful. So I wanted to really understand what the health advantages might be of friendship, and if there were any, in fact. So I took a really deep dive into the literature, and my goodness me, I seem to be reading for hours and hours, and I printed off endless things to read in between appointments and things. And there's definitely lots and lots of research, both looking at sort of animal studies and then lots of human studies. And they range from studies that looked at the psychology of friendship, even right down to the economics of friendship, looking at with whether your friends really did influence your success. Do your friends influence your weight, your health, your well-being? And quite frankly, it seems like they really do. So actually, if you've got a good and supportive group of friends, it seems that you have a lower BMI or a lower weight, or more likely to be a healthier weight. You're more likely to be healthy. But obviously that depends on the group of friends you're surrounding yourself with. But I thought that was quite interesting as well. People are talking a lot about the word well-being at the minute. And I always think that's a really funny word to define, because it seems like friendship, loneliness, and well-being all seem to fall into the same sentence quite frequently. And I wondered whether there really was a connection between well-being and friendship. And interestingly, it seems like there is. But if we think about what we mean by well-being, again, deep dive into the definition, seem to be tons of them. Lots of them were quite waffly, to be honest. But it seemed like well-being is a sense of physical and mental health or wellness, and a sense of satisfaction and engagement in life, and also that people have a meaning to life. So I think they would say that if someone feels like life's pointless, what's the point? I don't really understand why we're even here. It would seem that you probably don't have a great sense of well-being. And then whenever you look, scientists had decided were the pillars of well-being. It seemed that a lot of them were all centered around positive relationships, engagement with life as well. And obviously, if you've got positive relationships and friends, you're usually a bit more likely to be engaged in life. So you're probably more likely to go on that hike, or sign up for that 5K, or go to a charity event, or sign up to go to a formal ball or something like that, if you've got a group of friends that you're going to do it with. And I think the other thing that was really important for well-being was that you had to be experiencing positive emotions. And the reality is, I don't know about you, but certainly with my friends, sometimes the topics are really hard and heavy, and sometimes there's sadness in the room. But I have to say, a lot of the time, even when there's tears, there's usually a lot of laughter and a lot of fun. And even just, we'll often share little jokes in our WhatsApp group, or I have to admit that we're definitely of that age that we're sharing little memes and videos with each other about perimenopause and menopause and our impending dementia and memory loss. So we always have quite a few laughs about that. And I think the other thing about wellness seems to be around accomplishments. So whether you are striving towards a goal in life, having accomplishments, and then having someone who is there to, I suppose, acknowledge your accomplishments and celebrate with you. I think the flip side of the coin, which I'm not going to shy away from, is that there's no doubt there's some friendships that can be quite stressful, and even good friendships can go through rocky periods where perhaps one person is just not seeing eye to eye with the other person, or one person has different expectations of the relationship than the other. And I think that I think it's important that we acknowledge that. I'm not saying that all friendships are rainbows and lollipops, and there's definitely times that friendships just end for different reasons, or that friendships have to definitely navigate a storm. With that all said and done, I think the thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about was why it might be beneficial for you to make a bit more of an effort with friends. So again, we know our teenagers. We've got teenagers at home. They seem to be pretty obsessed with their friends. They're on Snapchat and they're sending photos of themselves, I don't know, sticking their tongue out and all sorts of things. And that seems to be a lot of repeated interactions and touch points. And I know that even in our house recently, people have been a bit more reluctant even to go on holiday because they're going to miss their friends, etc. So we know when people are in their teenage years, friends become a really, really important part of life. But then we sort of partner off, and often our partner often becomes our really big focus, and it can be super easy for us to be so busy with work and partners and kids that actually it's really, really hard to find time for friends. So I think I wanted to chat today about why I think it's really worth your effort, because I think it's a lovely thing to do, but also the health benefits that you might receive. Basically, we know that whenever you're with friends, you are much more likely to be releasing a neurotransmitter in your brain called oxytocin. And oxytocin is a neurotransmitter that is released a lot at childbirth, when you're breastfeeding, and it's all supposed to have been about connection and connecting with your baby. But the reality is that what we now know is that we actually release this hormone a lot whenever we're having positive interactions with friends or family or acquaintances, but it's definitely something that we release. And it seems to be that we release substantial quantities when we're in the company of people that we're very relaxed and familiar with and we're having fun with. And so what are the advantages of releasing all this oxytocin? Well, basically, it seems to not only be good about bonding with a child, but it's really good about bonding with other adults. And it also increases empathy and generosity and trust. And we know in any society, the more empathy you have, tend to be the more successful that society is, because people are much more understanding and show a lot more kindness. And obviously that's a little bit looser, but there's really helpful physical benefits as well. So we know that oxytocin actually mediates the amount of cortisol in your body. And lots of people have heard of cortisol. We all know it as the stress hormone. So if you're being chased by a tiger, you get a big surge of cortisol. But you also get a big surge of cortisol when you're really stressed at work, or when you're about to step on stage and give a presentation, or if you're really, really worried constantly about your relationship or money, you'll just be pumping out cortisol all the time. And the problem with that is that not only is it absolutely exhausting for your body, because quite frankly, you can't keep running from the tiger all the time, but the reality is that it also makes things like your blood pressure increase. And so we know that high blood pressure is associated with things like heart disease, kidney disease, heart attacks, strokes, and all those things that we're trying to avoid. So we know that actually, if you're releasing more of that good hormone, oxytocin, then it means that you're going to be mediating the effects of the cortisol in your body. Another study back in 2017 with medical students, interestingly, so they asked two groups of medical students to do a certain exercise program. And one group, they did the exercise program on their own. And then the other group, they did it as a group together. And it was a once a week exercise class. And then they followed them for quite a few months to see the health benefits. And while both groups definitely benefited from a fitness or physical fitness point of view, the group who were working together and exercising together actually showed markedly improved stress levels and improved mental health. The group who were exercising on their own didn't show as helpful benefits at all on those two categories. Now, obviously, that's only one study, but anecdotally, it definitely makes sense. And when they chatted with the medical students afterwards, what was really interesting was that the group who exercised alone, although they actually said that they did get into a routine of following through with the exercise plan, the group who they spoke to who were exercising together said they looked forward to their exercise class, that they often lingered afterwards to chat with people and interact, and it became kind of a highlight of their week. So I just think it's really interesting that you can be doing the exact same physical activity, but when you do it with other people, it seems to have even more health benefits. If I think back to those people who've been asking on those Facebook groups about how they might make friends, I know as a doctor, I often do suggest that people look up, like there's lots of hiking or walking clubs here where we live. There's lots of exercise in Australia generally is massive. There's gyms, Pilates studios, yoga studios. And I've ended up seeing so many patients and friends who, to be honest, have met someone at their yoga class. And the next thing they're going off on a yoga retreat to Bali. And, it is amazing how these friendships can evolve. So sometimes a group activity is a really good opportunity. I have another patient recently telling me that she'd had a lifelong ambition to do pottery. And she had recently joined a pottery group here on the Central Coast. And she was so excited because she'd actually found it really challenging to break in and find a group of friends because she doesn't have any children at home. And she was really just going to work, coming home, going to the gym by herself, not meeting anyone. But this pottery class has been a really, really great way of making friends. And I know personally, I'm not a very good singer, but I know for quite a while I went to a community choir, and that was a very joyful experience because singing does tend to be fun in a group, but it was also another great way to make new friends and connections and just have some sort of really good fun together. I'd like to also say some other interesting things that I find amazing. So I'm very interested in these blue zones in the world. And for anyone who doesn't know what those are, they're these very interesting areas of the world where you get these pockets of people who seem to live very, very long lives, but very, very long and healthy lives. So they seem to live into their 80s, 90s and beyond, but are functioning at a very high level, still very engaged in their community. And so scientists have called them blue zones. And whenever they looked at one of these blue zones in Greece, in a remote island in Greece, they were trying to understand why these people live for so long. And so all sorts of scientists have been looking into it. Is it to do with their diet? Is it to do with a certain type of sweet potato they eat or a certain type of vegetable they have in their diet? Or is it the olive oil? Or is it all of the things? But one of the things that they did come up with is that people on this island, social interaction is massively important. And so, for example, in the village, they have a games area, and it's very, very traditional that in the evenings, lots of people will sit down and play various board games and chess games, or sit together chatting. And that these older members of the community are absolutely and very much engaged in this the whole way through their life. So I think it just goes to show you that we might all be trying to look for that golden bullet that's going to make us look and feel healthier for longer. But actually the answer might literally just be at the end of the telephone. And it might just be about calling a friend and making that connection to meet in person. I think the other thing that's really interesting is people feel like in ways we're more connected than ever. But are we? Because really, if you are just liking someone's Facebook post or scrolling through and you're just sitting on your lounge every evening watching TV and looking on your phone. Are we really that connected? I have to say, I'm definitely guilty of doing exactly that. But the reality is, I don't know that I come off from that feeling particularly great. But I do know that when I go out and meet my friends, which is sometimes for a walk, or sometimes we go out for dinner, or we go for a movie, I always come home so glad that I've, made the effort and got ready and gone out. So I think one of the other things that is really, really important is that if we look at dementia, we know that if you are socially isolated or lonely, you're about 50% more likely to have dementia. And the World Health Organization have really highlighted loneliness as one of the major epidemics that they see becoming a big problem. And I find it unbelievable when I started looking at some of the statistics around the impact of loneliness on our physical health and mortality or risk of dying. And I think this is going to blow your mind, but basically, if someone is lonely, they are about on par with someone who's smoking 15 cigarettes a day, or someone who's completely inactive, or someone with morbid obesity in terms of their mortality rate. So I think, just let that sink in, because I think in this world that we live in today, it's just so easy to get really caught up with work and busyness and going to the gym and doing the shopping and coming home and doing chores and then flopping on that sofa, and you think you've ticked all the boxes. You're taking vitamins, you're looking after your body, you're exercising, your weight's great. Maybe you don't smoke, you don't vape, you don't drink very much. That's all great. But actually, if you're completely socially isolated, it's literally like you're not doing some of those things. And I think that just blows my mind. And it's something that we do not completely understand why it's the case. Another frequent fact that is often bandied around is that marriage is better for the health of men, but not so good for the health of women. So interestingly, friendship may be more protective than marriage and family for everyone. So I would encourage everyone to make that effort with friends and make friends, but also try and maintain friendships. And that can be challenging as well. So my tips for trying to maintain friends, and I'm certainly not an expert at this, I just do try my best, but would be, first of all, listen properly. And I'm a chatterbox, so sometimes I have to remind myself that I need to actively listen. And that means that I'm not just waiting for a pause in the conversation so that I can jump in with my 10 cents worth, but I'm actually really listening to what my friends are talking about. And I'm making it really obvious to them that I'm listening and I'm hearing what they're saying, and I'm reflecting back on what they're saying. So I think that's really important. We all know how lovely it is to feel like someone has heard you, and what you're going through is really important, whether it's positive or negative. We all want someone to listen. So that's my first tip. My second thing is about keeping your word. So the beautiful thing about friendships is that people will often share their very intimate secrets and details about their health or their lack of health, or their partner's lack of health, or relationship problems that they might be having, or an issue or stress they're having with one of their children or a family member. And I think it's so lovely when someone feels they can unburden themselves and they can ask for a bit of advice. But I think it's really important that we're trustworthy and we don't take that piece of information and either weaponize it or go and share it whenever you know that it's not something that they want out there in public. The other thing is to think about, what is the love language of that friend? Make an effort. If you know that that person is someone who really appreciates maybe receiving a card, or words are really important to them, then maybe you write them a little note or send them a lovely email. If you know someone is very practical, or they love maybe going for walks, or that they've had a rough time recently and that you can help them, think about what it is that you can do to express that you see them and you see what's important for them, because everyone has a different language of love and how they feel appreciated and how they give their own love. The other thing is really to be
supportive. And sometimes that can feel really hard. Life's really busy. You've got work, you come home, you're running around with kids or grandkids, delivering them left, right and centre. And all you want to do in the evening is come in and relax. And maybe the last thing that you want to do is to chat on the phone or to show up for an event that someone has organised or a party. But, you know, it's just trying to dig deep and make that effort for that person, because not only will that person just be so appreciative of that support, but as I've said to you, you will reap the rewards of this friendship in dividends as well. And lastly, honesty. I will counter this by saying it's not about being brutal to someone or telling them that, you know, you hate their clothes or whatever, but, you know, just maybe being honest with someone and giving them a gentle probe if you feel like they're going off track or you're worried about them. It's being honest and talking to that person and maybe challenging them or saying that you'll help them. So, you know, if someone's really struggling with sleep or they're struggling with their kids or maybe they're struggling by drinking a bit too much, you know, maybe you might offer to go along with them to an appointment with a health professional. You might offer to go walking with them, or maybe you might offer to go on a healthy eating or a healthy or a wellness journey with them, just so that they feel like they've got someone who can support them along the way. So hopefully you can see why I'm so passionate about friendships and connection. And you can see that these sometimes wonderful, sometimes tricky relationships that can be full of love and intimate conversations and loyalty, and can be so building of self-esteem and self-worth, and can just be full of trust, can also bring you so many physical benefits, like being a healthier weight, having lower blood pressure, having less chance of dementia, and heaps of other physical benefits of friendship. Hopefully today you'll decide that it is worth making that extra effort. And I know that it does take time and energy to do so. And I know that you have to try and find friends who match your expectations of friendship, and you'll go in through different chapters of your life when friendships will be very intense, and at other times they'll sort of wax and wane a little bit. But I hope that you will make the decision to see this as a really important part of your wellness journey and the ability to impact someone else's wellness journey. And you will see that having really, really good friends is such an investment, not only in your health now, but in the future as well. Is there any hints or tips that you could give us from all these years of experience that you've had working with so many people as to, you know, the strategies that people could use to try and help themselves have the best chance of having a happy, successful relationship?
Sure, I'll try my best with that one. I think we all crave feeling loved and secure. I think that's the bottom line, right? And we are all very capable of giving love and a sense of security to each other. Very capable. We do that. We raise humans, right? We do that. We make them feel safe and secure.
Yeah, I think you've absolutely nailed it. It seems so straightforward.
It is difficult. It comes with its challenges. It's possible. And the more you do the work on yourself, the more you can stand up to a healthy relationship. The more selfless you can be, the more compassionate, the more understanding. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to stand up for yourself and for what's right for you, but you also be able to be more and more relational.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything, if anyone was listening and they were a little bit nervous or anxious about going ahead and seeing a psychologist or relationship counselor, what would you say to them to encourage them to give it a go?
I would say that feeling a bit nervous and apprehensive is normal. Don't stop doing it because you feel nervous or you not sure. The biggest acts of courage, like Brené Brown says, they require a lot of vulnerability. So that vulnerability can be disclosed as well. First thing you can say, look, it's very hard for me to be here. It took me a long time to manage to make this appointment. I'm quite nervous, or so on, I've never done this before. Or you can be quite open and honest. It's very important to find the right therapist as well. And I believe that the best therapist is the one that connects with you, not, how many degrees or distinctions or this or that, but it's about holding that safe, secure space that can see through to you and be there with you, take your hand, and say, okay, let's do this.
What about if someone was listening and they feel that they know in their heart their relationship is over, but they maybe have children or pets and they want to be able to try and navigate the end? Is a relationship psychologist or counselor still a good place to go to try and navigate the end of that relationship?
Yeah, we can do that at times, depending on how they relating, how healthy is the end of the relationship.
Yes.
But there are some beautiful work that can be done with couples. We call it uncoupling.
Gwyneth Paltrow and her conscious uncoupling.
Yeah, conscious uncoupling. Yes, exactly. It's a book that we recommend. So there's some of that work that can be done in terms of negotiating and also celebrating the history of that couple, what they have been for each other, grieving the dreams of that couple, things that they're not going to share anymore or do together or have together,
I think we're nearly finished. Is there anything that you would love our listeners to know that we haven't talked about already?
Sure. Is there anything else? I wish that people could prioritize their relationships more. I think couples need to come first, and then the family and the children, the extended family and their careers and their work. And of course, sometimes you stand up when someone falls, or you make space for someone's, goal, individual goal, and that's part of being a couple and helping each other. But I don't think people prioritize their relationships the way that they should. I think they should put more of an effort, get to know each other more, ask questions, get a bit deeper. Can only get better.
Yeah, absolutely. A very wise person once said to me, it was actually a patient, and she said, lots of people spend at least 1 hour a day going to the gym, and they'll spend X amount of time looking after their skin or their body, and they'll, spend hours and hours looking after their children, but actually that sort of maybe their heart of their family, they literally have no time left for that. And then they wonder why there's no relationship left at the end. And I think she was an older lady, but she was probably pretty wise.
Very wise. And that's why I love working with the older people, because they're amazing when it comes to that. They look back and they go, this is what matters, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Going to, the healthier people, that survey there, a lot of research into this as well. The healthier people are in good marriages.
Yeah, absolutely. And loneliness is one of the biggest killers. So it's worth hanging on to your partner if you can. So, Angelica, do you have any resources or books or websites that you would recommend for people to look at?
Yeah, you mentioned Esther Perel, and definitely someone that I have done courses with, and always give, her resources out, and podcasts and things like that. The other one, in terms of relational therapy, which is another person, it's called Terence Real. So Terry Real. It's another person. His last book, Becoming Us, is a beautiful book and talks all about relational stuff. The other one is Susan Johnson, and she talks about emotional focus therapy. emotion focused therapy, which is in terms of attachments, the pursue and the withdraw. It's beautiful, very friendly book to understand, in terms of communication. That would be a very good one.
Yes, I've read that one.
Have you?
Yes, it's very
And
good.
in terms of, I think this is a book that everyone should read in terms of female and male sexuality. It's a book by Emily Nagoski, and it's called Come As You Are.
Yes, I read that as well.
Have you? Great.
Yes.
Yes. So I think that's another one that people should have a look. So those are good starting point. And
That's so helpful. You've been wonderful. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or other professional advice. Information is provided for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you have any health concerns, always consult your doctor.